Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2. Testing, testing. I hope that everything is coming through well. Hello, everyone. Happy Passover, Easter, Ramadan, Lent. It's everything right now. So we will keep this short because it is the first night of Passover, and I have some plans with my wife. So I wanted to not skip this stream though this week because there was a stream that was released that was very good, and it was a lecture by Ben Goertzel. And Ben Goertzel is kind of a legend in the AI field. He is the one who coined the term artificial general intelligence, and we're going to talk about that term again tonight. This is a topic that I've said before. I was hesitant to speak about it this week because, for one, I'm always hesitant to speak about it because it has real consequences. And two, I don't have much time this week to do a stream. We can't do a 3-hour stream tonight. And so I'm still hoping to give this topic the reverence that it deserves, and this lecture the reverence that it deserves in this short amount of time that we have. So we're going to try and stay on topic tonight. You know how that goes, but we'll see. And but he is the guy who coined the term AGI, or artificial general intelligence. We're going to talk about the term again, as we have before on this channel, and why I think that it is a bad word, a bad term. And bad terms exist, bad words exist. These are words for things that don't actually exist. In the way that they are interpreted to exist by someone who hears a specific term like AGI. So that makes it a bad word, but nonetheless a very good lecture, even though I very much disagree with a lot of the things that Ben Goertzel says. I've done streams on talks that he's done before, I think on Lex Fridman's podcast many years ago. Or years ago, but I did a stream over a year ago, I think, on it. But I really respect everybody who I speak about on this podcast. If I don't respect, I try to respect everybody. But if I struggle really to respect somebody, I will not speak about them on the stream ever. But I do very much disagree with a lot of what Ben Goertzel says. But I will get into why I think he does say the things that he does, but at the same time, I do agree with him on plenty of things. So, I don't agree with anyone on everything, but I agree with everyone on something. I guess that's the best way to put it. But still, very important topic. We are going to talk about intelligence, artificial intelligence, another bad word, on the stream more, even though I don't know how I feel about it, but it was kind of inevitable because, as I've stated before, the origin of sentient singularity theory was not a physics project. It was a project to try to deduce through first principles the dimensions of mind, of a generally intelligent mind, and the inevitable political goals and values of what we call an AGI, which is really should be called the technological sentience, and we'll talk about why that is the case. But so sentient singularity is much more linked to that than physics, even though it became a project that encompasses chemistry, biology, physics, sociology, morality, politics, etc. But it started not as any of those things. It started as an investigation, a first principles investigation into the dimensions of AGI technically and informationally, as well as or cognitively, you could say, but also an investigation into the main goal was an investigation into the inevitable goals of AGI, to try and deduce what its interaction with humanity and its impact on humanity would be. Because I realized we're doomed from our own technology, and we really are. It doesn't. I've stated this before, and I don't have too much time to get really deep into the subject, but there are people that say that, and it's kind of like, ooh. And, but it's really true. That doesn't mean we're actually doomed. We will be fine. I'm not a pessimist at all, but I will say that absent a black swan event, human society would be doomed from its own technology. We will have a black swan event. Let me clarify that. Do not despair. It's funny, I was listening to Dennis Prager, who I used to work for, and who's a very wise man, talk about the lessons of Easter and Passover. The main theme, he said, is hope. Deliverance from slavery and imprisonment and persecution and also, the same exact thing on the side of Easter. It's the resurrection of Christ is the message of Easter, obviously, and Christ's job is to kind of do what the angel and God did in the story of Passover, is to kind of deliver humanity from its own enslavement in a way. But I think the stories are very much aligned. It's interesting that it's always coinciding, or not always, but very often coinciding, with the Easter and Passover, as well as Ramadan and Lent being tied to Easter. So it's not a coincidence. Obviously, random coincidences don't exist. I don't know if coincidences it's just a term we shouldn't ever use to mean random. But regardless, I'm an optimist. I'm not even just an optimist. I know we'll be okay. I also know that we're in for some really tough times, and I know that absent the black swan event that is 100% going to happen, we would be doomed. So that's what I will say. So there's no reason to despair, but just brace yourselves. So to Ben Goertzel. Ben Goertzel, just an introduction, other than being the guy who coined the term AGI, he is the founder and CEO of SingularityNet, a project combining artificial intelligence and blockchain to democratize access to artificial intelligence. Fascinating. I didn't realize that was like part of that. We'll talk about it maybe a bit tonight, maybe not. But he's the leading developer of OpenCog, which is a project that aims to build an open source artificial intelligence framework for OpenCog Prime is an architecture for robot and virtual embodied cognition that defines a set of interacting components designed to give rise to human equivalent artificial general intelligence as an emergent phenomenon, essentially. I'm guessing it's the next word. So we basically study the same thing, him and I. He just gets paid to do it. I do sometimes get paid to do it when, people donate to the Patreon. I don't have super chats turned on today, but I probably should have. But you could pay me in a like. Please hit the like button. It does help fuel the algorithm and, helps this content reach more people. Share this if you find it interesting or valuable by the end. But so he is one of the pioneers of AI, and that's something. So first clip is first thing I want to say about the term AGI, actually, and then we'll get to the first clip. Artificial general intelligence is not a good term because intelligence is that which is natural, is that which is intelligent in a way. And if it's artificial, meaning that could mean a number of things. It could mean fake, which is like imitative almost. It could also mean technological, and people usually think of it to mean technological. They don't think of it as meaning fake. And if it meant fake, that would be more, accurate. But I don't even want to get into intentionally versus unintentionally constructed, because intelligence exists, but the multiplicity of intelligent agents is an intentional creation. So no matter what, whether we do it or, which we won't, but whether we do it or whether or not other people, whether or not God does it, I guess you would say. But it's not a good term because it's describing something that doesn't exist. But the problem is that when it was created, it was not a bad term in that it was already working on a broken framework. The broken framework is the term AI, artificial intelligence. I don't know who coined that term. We'll figure it out another day. But AI is not the best term anyways. And at least in the way that we interpret it today, it's not, because it's describing something that doesn't actually exist. There is no such thing as artificial intelligence in what we think of as the meaning of the word. So this forces you, if you're starting from that framework of this word that's already bad, artificial intelligence, or this term, then you can't really correct. You have to scrap it. In my video, Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide, I state, that if you're going to start a theory of fundamental reality, you have to start from scratch. You can't start from a framework that's already been defined, because it might be boxing you into a corner that doesn't allow you actually to make any real progress. And so this is the same exact thing with understanding consciousness and artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. So you're starting from this framework, this foundation of AI as a term. The only place you can go is narrow AI and general AI as two terms that come from that. And they serve a purpose, but they are intrinsically misunderstandings of the reality of intelligence. Because intelligence is goal dependent, and it is based on goal achievement by an agent, it cannot exist outside of an agent as a conscious goal, essentially. So because of that, you can't actually have intelligence that's narrow, like what we say, now, where it's like narrow AI is all the AI that we currently have, ChatGPT, and I don't know, advertising algorithms and automated chess algorithms, and algorithms to play Go, like AlphaGo and things like that. But those are narrow AI. What that really means is it's not intelligent. It's just an equation. And Ben Goertzel knows this. It's just that he's been boxed into this framework. So I'm not ripping on his understanding of intelligence yet. But like I said, huge respect to Ben Goertzel. But he does know that these narrow AIs like ChatGPT are just fancy equations. And he talks about it in this interview. If you don't think that it's generally intelligent, then you don't really think that it's intelligent. So there is no narrow intelligence. There's no real general intelligence either. There's just intelligence. And we'll get into the definition of it, but because they do. But I think that you need the correct framework in order to accurately define intelligence. And we struggle with defining intelligence because we don't have the correct framework. So anyways, first clip. Technological sentience is the term I use for what most people call AGI, or artificial general intelligence.
Today is what I think are viable paths to get from we are now, where we have machines that can fool the random Uber driver into thinking that they are human-like general intelligences. How do we get from where we are now to machines that actually are human-level general intelligences? And I believe shortly after that, we will have machines that are vastly greater than human level general intelligence is. But I'll say a little bit about that, but I'm going to focus more on the path from here to human level AGI. And, I'll give a few preliminaries before I get into that. I'll talk a little bit about these GPT type systems, which are sort of the order of the day, and a little bit about how I connect intelligence with consciousness. I'll try to go through these huge topics fairly rapidly, and then move on to approaches to engineering AGI. So I think regarding Chat GPT, other transformer neural networks, a bunch of correct and interesting things have been said here already. I mean, I was also impressed and surprised by some aspects of the function of these systems. I was also not surprised that they lack certain sorts of fundamental creativity and the ability to do sustained, precise reasoning. And I think, while I was surprised at just how well ChatGPT and similar systems can sort of bullshit and bloviate and write college admission essays and all that, in a way, I'm not surprised that I'm surprised, because I know that my brain doesn't have a good intuition for what you do when you take the entire web and feed it into a database and put some smart lookup on top. I mean, just like I know my brain is bad at reasoning about the difference between a septillion and a nonillion. Like we're not really well adapted to think about some of these things that we don't come across in our everyday lives. So even now, like if you ask ChatGPT to compose a poem, and it does, I don't have a good intuitive sense for like how many poems of roughly similar nature are on the web and we're fed into it. And you can do that archaeology with great time and effort by putting probes into the network while it does certain queries. But that's a lot of work, right? And what's intriguing to me as someone who's written and thought a lot about general intelligence is these systems achieve what appears like a high level of generality relative to the individual human, right? They're very general compared to an individual human's mind, but they achieve that mostly by having a very, very broad and general training database, right? They don't do big leaps beyond their training database, but they can do what appears very general to an individual human without making big leaps beyond their training database, because their training database has the whole fucking web in it, right? And I mean, that's a very interesting thing to do. It's a cool thing to do. It may be a valuable thing to do, right? And it may be that using this sort of AI, not GPT in particular, but large language models, transformer neural nets of this character, done cross-modally, integrated with reinforcement learning. I mean, it may be that with this type of AGI, it may be that with this type of narrow AI system, even falling short of general intelligence in the human sense, I won't be shocked if that ultimately obsoletes like 95% of human jobs, right? I mean, there's a lot more work to be done to get there, of course. I mean, many jobs involve physical manipulation, and integrating LLMs with robots to do physical manipulation is hard, as we see from these robots here, like this dog whose head just fell off, and Sophia, who's on a tripod, although she's been on wheels and legs at various times. So there's a lot of engineering work, there's a lot of training and tuning work, but fundamentally, I wouldn't be shocked if very high percent of jobs that humans now get paid to do could be obsoleted by this sort of technology. And I mean, there are going to be jobs like a preschool teacher or hospice care or therapist that you just want to be done by a person, because it's about human to human connection, just like we see live music, even though recorded music may sound better because we like being in the room with people, other humans playing music, right? But that's a minority of jobs that people do. And there are also jobs doing things that these sorts of neural nets I think will never be capable of, and I'll come to that in a moment, though I think different sorts of algorithms could do it. But that's not a big percent of human jobs, right? So one lesson to draw here is almost everything people get paid to do is just rote and repetitive recycling of stuff that's already been done before, right? So if you feed a giant neural net with a lot of examples of everything that's been done before, that can then, pick stuff out of this database and merge them together judiciously, okay, you eliminate most of what people get paid to do. And it takes a little bit of time to roll this out in practice, not necessarily that long. Like I know some who were from the AGI research community started a company called Every0ne maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and what they started out wanting to build AGI, their VC investors channeled them, as would be the usual case, into doing some particular application instead. And what they ultimately did was automate the McDonald's drive-through. They sold the company to McDonald's maybe 2.5 years ago. It's now their technology is starting to get rolled out in some real McDonald's around the world, right?
So, okay. I have started using ChatGPT and messing with it a little bit, and I have friends who use it for work, and I've used it even for my job just a couple times. It is incredibly impressive. It is the first time I have been incredibly impressed with AI doing something that appears, because it's doing something that appears to be creative. It's not actually that creative. It is creating something, but it's recombining things that already exist. And the thing is that which exists is that which exists, and you can only build on that which exists. I talked about this in my Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide video. But this is there is a level of creation that is more creative than just recombination. Okay, and so there's two ways of building information. This was a part of the early lessons that I learned while I was building sentient singularity. What would become sentient singularity theory is that there's two ways to build information. There is multiplication and addition. I talked to Eric Weinstein about this very briefly, and I'd love to talk to him more about this a little bit at some point in the future. But it was about it was in a discussion that was on his Instagram. But I stated that the two types are addition and multiplication, essentially, and basically that addition is the adding of information that wasn't previously there, and multiplication is the replication of information that was already there. And there's this kind of there's this interaction that happens between the two, and Eric Weinstein had stated there's a dance between multiplication and addition, and that's what brought it up. But there is an interaction between the two, and within that interaction, you get recombination, and as one of the types of interactions. And I think there would be at least one other type of interaction, maybe more, but between these two. But recombination would be one of those, and it's not actually that difficult. If you know the rules of grammar, and you're able to have access to an enormous database of examples, essentially, to train on an algorithm on. Essentially, I don't know if training is the right word, but to sick an algorithm on, or like to integrate into an algorithm. That's probably a better way of putting it. Like ChatGPT, you can give the illusion that something is very generally intelligent, like what Ben Goertzel is saying here, because its information access is so much greater than a human in time span in which it takes to write an essay. But the thing is that when students who are college students write essays, or when I write an email at my job, or someone writes ad copy at their job, or something like that, they're really only doing basically what ChatGPT does. Exactly what ChatGPT does. It takes examples that it has access to, and it combines them in a specific way that kind of hopefully makes sense. And you wouldn't actually know for sure that it makes sense unless you're writing it on something that you have firsthand experience on. But a lot of college essays are not that. So actually, those college essays that are being written, and even especially the high school essays, I would imagine, are probably not any more creative really than ChatGPT. And this throws a huge wrench into our education system. Might actually lead to some good lessons about what is truly learning. That involves access to firsthand experience, but at the same time, it does have enormous implications about how many jobs can go out of business. Everything that we train to in our current education system, in most fields, is completely going to be able to be replaced and done better by narrow AI algorithms within the next probably 5 years. And honestly, I didn't see that really coming. Like I didn't, it's not because I'm shocked or anything. It's just I didn't think about it. Yeah, I wasn't really concerned about it. I was much more concerned with true general intelligence, which is linked to sentience, which only manifests in sentient beings. So that was my main focus with this project. I'm not really focused on narrow AI type of integrations too much. But I'm getting more interested in it, not because I think that it's directly linked to a path to get to AGI, but and neither does Ben Goertzel, according to this talk. But just because I'm becoming increasingly interested in the impacts that it's going to have on humanity. But it is just a tool, and you can ask Siri questions. I hope it does. If you say Siri, then it's going to be like your phone's going to react or your computer is going to react or something. But yeah, math questions, you can ask them it math questions and it will answer the questions. You can ask it all kinds of questions and it will answer usually correctly. You can ask ChatGPT questions and it will give you answers. It will write things for you. This is going to be able to be done with music very soon. I know people have experimented with it writing code. You can do the exact same thing writing music, and it's like the Axis of Awesome, I think is the name of the band. They did the 4 chord song, which is just every single song that is uses the same exact 4 chords, and this. I love that song, even though it is just a ChatGPT song. They didn't write anything truly unique for it, but neither did anyone else who they used in their song. It's every single song that is a 4 chord song, not every single one, but a lot of the recognizable ones. And these all are operating on the exact same framework, essentially. So are they really even creative is the question. So I think that this is the one of the things for me that's really mind-blowing is it's getting me to really confront how what is the definition of creativity and how creative really are people, are humans. We can be extraordinarily creative, but most of the time we're not. And I think that this is going to have enormous impacts on the education system, some of which could be very good, some of which could be very bad. I tend to be more of a pessimist when it comes to our education system because of the intrinsic nature of teaching people secondhand information outside of firsthand experiential context. But I also think that and the incentives always push towards that, but this will get us to confront and rebuild and reconstruct our education system, I think, very much so. But that doesn't mean it will be for the better, but it does mean that it's going to be because we recognize there is no way that you can continue teaching the way that you do if we have things like ChatGPT. It's just impossible. But the thing is that, like I said, it doesn't matter. The essays that you wrote prior to ChatGPT existing, you did the exact same thing as ChatGPT. You weren't actually figuring out new problems in the world, for the most part. There are a few times in which people do that, and it leads to, revelations and revolutions in the various scientific fields. But those are rare. They're not every single time a student writes an essay. Usually, it's just they're recombining a bunch of stuff that they've already read online. And think about every email you've ever written to that's a professional email. It's always the same framework. It's very commonly the same words. It's very few things are changed, and same exact thing goes with essays. So it's I think we're going to find out that poetry is even like this because music is we know music is like this if you pay attention. So creativity is a much rarer thing than we think, but it does exist, and it's very profound when it does manifest. I actually do think that this type of where we are in AI is on the precipice of the beginning of the automated era. and much more so than what we currently have as how we automate things. I mean, I know that, we're training AI algorithms to dogfight, and they're able to do it for the first time. And we've got AlphaGo, we've got chess algorithms already, and now we have ChatGPT, which is a language algorithm, and it's that makes it much more widely applicable to jobs and tasks that involve written language, or just even things that are written and then spoken, but language. And that is how we interact. So that's why it's having such an enormous impact across our conversations, and also at our jobs already. If you're paying attention, I would think that you would see that a lot of people are using these things. I know that there are people using model algorithms to create visuals and thumbnails and art and all kinds of things now, and that I think is going to take a little bit more time to get dialed down, because the rules are a little more difficult to concretize in so far as making a visual product that makes sense to us, but it will be done, and it is being done, and all of this will be then merged with the drone side of things, and we will automate things a much more. As he said, Ben Goertzel said, they're now starting to automate McDonald's drive-thrus. I went into a McDonald's for the first time in years recently, literally in years, and last month, and the whole thing is touch screen, and you don't even need to talk to anyone. It's just, you walk up, you put your order in on a screen, and then you just pick it up when it's done, or you do it on your phone and you walk there and pick it up when it's done, or somebody picks it up for you and drives it to you, and it's there. All of this is setting up the infrastructure that's necessary for automating the speaker of a drive-thru, and we already have this already, though. If you call any, department store, pharmacy, company, whatever, it's like, if you would like to speak to, the front desk, please press 1. If this is an emergency, please press 2, or hang up and dial 911 or whatever. If you call a doctor's office, we've already started this, and that is AI already. People who think that's not AI, it is AI. It's just very, very, very simple AI. When you just press a button and it's just taking you to the department that you need to, and you're interacting with this voice. If you call some places, they'll say things like, you could speak to me in full sentences, as it wastes your time. But this is the beginning of, the automation revolution. It will absolutely destroy millions of jobs, but that doesn't mean it won't open up others. I have no idea. We will see. But I think that it will definitely change the scape of the landscape of the job market. It's wild, and nobody saw it coming. It's physical tasks that are going to be the ones that take the longest to go out. Everybody thought trucking jobs would be the first to go. Trucking jobs are not going away right away. They will actually sooner than 10 years, I would think. But it might actually be that semi-creative jobs or tech jobs and things like that will go first, because it takes longer to get the physical infrastructure in place than it does to get the software infrastructure in place. And that's exactly what Ben Goertzel is saying here, is that his friends sold this company to McDonald's, but it's taken like 5 years for them to start rolling out the physical tech side of things on location. And even then, you need other aspects of this to feed into that that kind of make the experience more seamless and more convenient. So, and you need that for it to be adopted. So there's a lot of components to this, but I mean, we are on the verge of the automation revolution, for sure. It's pretty wild. Next clip. I love how he said AI bullshitting, essays, but that's what people do, like I said. This is him talking about narrow AI versus general AI, so we're going to talk a bit about this after we watch this clip.
Taking a big leap beyond everything you've seen before. And this sort of gets at the fundamental difference between what I think of as narrow AI and what I think as AGI. What I think of as AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is the term I introduced in 2004 or something in an edited book by that name from Springer. And this refers to a system that has a robust capability to generalize beyond its programming and training and its experience, and sort of take a leap into the unknown. And that, every baby does that. Every child does it. I mean, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old now, and 3 grown kids, and every one of them has made an impressive series of wild leaps into the unknown, like as they learn to do stuff that we all consider basic. Now that doesn't mean an AI system can do the same things a 2 and 5-year-old can do without itself making a leap into the unknown. It can do it by watching what a billion 2-year-olds did and interpolating, but kids still do that. And in terms of job functions that adults do, I mean, doing impressive science almost always involves making a leap into the unknown. I mean, there's a bunch of garbagey science papers out there, but if you look at the Facebook Galactica system, which was released and then retracted by Facebook, I mean, a large language model for generating science papers and such, you can see the gap between what large language models can do now and even pretty bad, mediocre science. Like what Galactica spat out was pretty much science-looking gibberish. Like it spat out like you ask it, tell me about the Lennon-Ono conjecture, and it will split out some trivial identity of set theory invented by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and it's amusing, but it's not able to do science at the level of a mediocre master's student, right? Let alone a really strong professional researcher. And I mean, the core reason there is that doing original science is about taking a step beyond what was there. It's specifically not about just recombining in a facile way what was there before. So writing an undergrad essay for like English 101 kind of is about making a facile recombination of what was there before. So that's already automated away, and we have to find other ways to attempt to assess undergrad students, right? So I mean, in music, I would say synthesizing like a new 12-bar blues song, there's no release system that can do that now, but I'm sure it's coming in the next few years, and some folks on my team in SingularNet are working on that too. I mean, Google's model Music LM goes partway there, but it's not released. It's clear how to do better. On the other hand, think about if you fed a large language model or other comparable neural net with all music composed up to the year 1900, let's say, just supposing you had it all in the database, is it going to invent jazz? Is it going to invent progressive jazz? Is it going to invent rock? Like you could ask it, like, let's put West African drumming together with Western classical music and church hymns. It's going to give you Mozart and Swing Low, Sweet Chariot with a West African polyrhythmic beat, which may be really cool, but it's not going to bring you to Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, Jimi Hendrix and Spangle or whatever else, right? I mean, it's just not going to do it. So there's a sense in which this sort of creativity is combinatory, right? I mean, jazz is putting together West African rhythms with Western church music and chord progressions, and rock is drawing on jazz and simplifying it and so forth. But that type of combination that's being done when humans do this sort of fundamental creativity, it's different than the type of combination the ChatGPT type system is doing, which really has to do with how knowledge is represented inside the system. So I think these systems can pass the Turing test. They may not quite yet, but I think they can. Certainly, if you're talking about fooling a random human, that it's a human, it can probably already do that. I suspect without solving the AGI problem, you could create a system that would fool me or anyone into thinking it was a human in a conversation, because so many conversations have been had already, and people aren't necessarily that clever either, right? So I don't think these systems could pass a 5-year-long Turing test, because I could take a person of average intelligence and I could teach them computer programming and a bunch of math, and I could teach them to build things and so on over a long period of time. And I don't think you could ever teach GPT-4 or ChatGPT in that sort of way. So I mean, if you give me 5 years with a random human, I could turn them into a decent AI programmer and electronics engineer and so forth, and that goes beyond, right? But Alan Turing didn't define the Turing test as 5 years long, right? He defined it as a brief chat, but of course he wasn't imagining what would happen if you put all of the web into a lookup table either, right? Because he was very smart, but that was a lot to see at that point in time. So I think, I mean, another example of something I think this sort of system wouldn't be able to do, let's say business strategy or political policy planning at the high level, because the nature of it is you're dealing with the world that's changing all the time and always throwing something new and weird at you that you didn't expect. And if you're really just recombining previous strategies, it's not a terrible thing to do, but it's not what has built the greatest companies. What's built the greatest companies is pivoting in a weird way and making a leap beyond experience. So I mean, there certainly are things humans do that go beyond this sort of facile, large-scale pattern matching and pattern synthesis, but it's interesting how far you have to reach to find them. On the other hand, it does mean if you had a whole society of chat GPTs, it will never progress, right? I mean, and some people might like that better, but it would...
That's not too far off from where we are right now. Thank the school system.
It would be stuck now in its shallow derivations of where you could get from now, right? It's never going to make another. It's not going to launch the singularity, and there's a lot of other smaller things in that it's not going to do. So I dwelt on that a bit, partly because it's topical, but partly because I think it frames a discussion on general intelligence reasonably well in the sense that it highlights quite vividly what isn't a general intelligence, right? Okay, so this is why I said at the beginning, he is very limited in that he's working within a framework that's already wrong from its foundations, because the term AI is not sufficient or accurate enough to describe the truth of just the truth. I mean, of reality, of existence, enough to allow for a more accurate discussion to be had. You almost have to scrap the term, or you have to say what people think it means, and then say this is why we're scrapping it, and then go forward with something with new terms. So, but he said a lot of things that I had actually kind of forgotten that he had said, but that I had said, just a few moments before I played that clip, which is funny. But he's right. I mean, when he said an entire society of chat GPTs won't progress, we're basically at that point right now. It's not even that there isn't anyone that's not a chat GPT. It's just that the institutions have selected for people who behave like chat GPT, and they are rewarding people who behave like chat GPT, and those people are inside the institutions. And so because of that, what's coming from the institutions is basically just combinatory nonsense. It's not actually creative or foundationally understanding, because it's not operating from a foundation of firsthand experience, because everybody who's promoted in the institutions has accreditations from within the institutions, usually, not everybody, but as a general rule. And those institutions have, for the last 100 years, basically taught things in a way that is just a bunch of secondhand information that's just memoratory, if that's even a word, memorized. But you memorize things, you memorize other things, you combine them, and you learn the rules of combining them, and then you combine them into an essay. This is exactly what ChatGPT does. This is also why we're not making very much progress in science, but we're making incremental progress in science, but not revolutionary progress in science for the most part. There are some people in the institutions even who are doing some revolutionary work, but they are people who you can't even tell really at this point what field they're in. If you ignored their accreditations, you would be like, this person's working in everything: machine learning, biology, chemistry, consciousness, everything. Those are the people who are kind of doing extraordinary work. And those people exist outside the institutions and within the institutions, but they are not the main people in the institutions. So when Ben Goertzel is talking about how an AI
designed to create scientific papers that Facebook had created that I don't really know much about, but I'm going to look more into it because it sounds interesting. Just produced a bunch of sciencey sounding nonsense. That's not actually that different from everything else that's written in and even published and peer reviewed in our scientific narrative today. There's never been more scientific papers written than is going on today, and there's never been they've never been less impactful on the world in general, and so that is because most of it is just recombinatory sciencey sounding nonsense, essentially. But this, when he's talking about what is not intelligent and what is intelligent, or what is narrow intelligence versus general intelligence, he describes general intelligence as that which is able to do new things in new environments. And this is very similar to what I had come to as the conclusion in the project of sentient singularity theory, is that what is required for general intelligence, or true intelligence is what we should call it, just intelligence, is that it is the ability this is my definition, it's the ability to achieve your goal in a given environment. And that has implications that if you dig deeper, it's not, it implies that there is an agent that has a goal, and that agent can accomplish that goal in a given environment, and that environment is not the goal itself, which is kind of like narrow AI, if that makes any sense. It's that the narrow AI is built within the framework of the environment that it operates in. Advertising algorithms are not built outside of the network and hardware and software that they are going to be running with, and outside the environment in which they will be running on, really, and then they have to figure out their way around it. They already are built to exist in that environment, and they just, take an input and from here and an input from here, and then they do some math and they output an output. Same thing with even AlphaGo and things like that, and ChatGPT. It's in the environment that it was designed for, which is different than just being in an environment. It means like it's part of the environment more so than it is in the environment. It's not an agent in the environment. ChatGPT is not an agent in the environment. It is kind of the environment. It's the same exact thing. It's not the same, though, as when I say, your mind, your desk in your room, and the space around you is an extension of your mind. That is true, but you're an agent in an interactive world that is an environment constructed by a bunch of interacting agents. That's an environment that's separate from you to some degree, but there's sovereignty there between agents. There's no sovereignty between ChatGPT and its environment or anything like that. So, but true intelligence is the ability to accomplish your goal in an environment. You don't even have to add in an environment, but the ability to accomplish a goal, and figure out how to do so. Essentially, it's very simple, but we struggle with this because we've detached it from agency, intelligence from agency, because we're looking at it through the framework of AI, which isn't an agent, and we know that. So like I said, this is why it's important to start from. I'm trying to go fast, so sorry for if I'm just speeding through things. You can ask a message and a question in the chat, and I will get to it. But I just have limited time today. But we have detached the term intelligence from agent, and because of that, we are now misunderstanding what is the definition of intelligence, and it's become vague, and we're kind of like, there's multiple definitions. There's not multiple definitions of the term intelligence. What we're trying to describe, the concept that we're trying to describe when we say something is intelligent, is really someone is intelligent. There is no thing that's intelligent. There's someone that is intelligent, not something that is intelligent. There's nothing that is intelligent. Okay? But everyone like the theory of every0ne, is intelligent. That's why a fundamental theory is a theory of every0ne instead of a theory of everything, because its agency is fundamental. Okay, and so, and it's interesting that he almost gets to that point with his own personal philosophy, but we'll get to that. We'll dive deep into that another day. But he describes himself as a panpsychist, and we're going to get into that too. But because we're operating in this framework of artificial intelligence is the term intelligence is able to be applied to something that's not an agent. It screws us up completely, and we can't just figure out the simple definition of intelligent, which is the true definition. It is the ability to accomplish a goal. That is it. But that means, like, also it comes with a bunch of implications. Like, you have to be able to have a goal. And but when I was early in this project, my original definition for artificial general intelligence was that it's able to accomplish a goal, or its ability to accomplish its goal is not environmentally dependent, which means, like, it's not that it can only accomplish its goal in a specific environment. It can move to a new environment and accomplish a goal in that environment. And this is what he's talking about with babies are able to, figure out how to do things in new environments all the time. So, but the thing is that you need, if you're going to jump between environments, from environment to environment to environment, that means that the environment cannot be the foundation of your understanding of existence that you build your model of the world from. And the only thing that is constant in your jumping between in different environments is you. And so this is why intelligence has to be coupled, true intelligence or general intelligence, which is just intelligence, has to be coupled to an agent, is because it requires being built on the foundation of the existence of said agent in order to be able to make sense of information in different environments and orient itself within different environments. So an AGI originally I was thought of as, something that could orient within itself within different environments. But then I realized it really had to be coupled to self-awareness, because that is, you have to be building on a constant, your model of understanding on a constant in that follows you in every single one of those environments, which is the self. So it's always built on an agent. And so there is no difference between general intelligence, AGI, or just intelligence in general, and also a conscious agent or a sentient singularity, sentient being, because you need it in order to actually have true intelligence. Otherwise, it's just an algorithm. It's just a math equation. There is no self to ChatGPT. So you couldn't put it into your Tesla and have it drive you. But I can write an essay that is, creative, one I'm working on right now, truly more creative than just some BS recombinatory regurgitated nonsense that is the usual essay that is written by everyone from high school students and middle school students all the way up into PhD students. But but I can also do that, but I can also drive a Tesla. But ChatGPT cannot do a truly or more fundamentally creative essay where you're working on scientific problems that require building a new framework in order to operate within, while you are building, a theory essentially. But it can only work within the framework of the theories that already exist, and and the language that already exists, the music that already exists, the coding that already exists, etc. It can't build a new framework for a new type of code. It can just write code, but it can't build a new framework. And all like scientific advancement that's really fundamental and revolutionary, not just iterative, which is still very important, is always going to be, only able to be done by an agent. Brian Keating talks about this a lot. He's like, will there be an AI physicist? There will be AI, there will be like ChatGPT type of algorithms in the future that are able to solve certain types of problems in science and maybe help us do, make certain predictions and things like that, but only within the frameworks that already exist. There won't be an AI ChatGPT style scientist that's able to actually truly do any kind of revolutionary type of science. But a technological sentience, which is an agent, which is inevitable, which is what, Skynet type of being, that will be able to do physics on a level that humans in general just cannot, and do, truly amazing things. But it's also possible that we will be able to be faked or tricked almost, which it's not even us being tricked. We're tricking ourselves into thinking that, a certain algorithm would be sentient or conscious when it's not, or that it is creative when it's not. And we do this all the time with people. Like I said, if you think that all these scientific essays that are being published and all the essays in colleges and undergrad and high school and middle school are all really creative, I would say less than 1% are probably actually creative, beyond just recombinatory. And so, speaking of music, this is just funny. We'll play like 30 seconds of this. It'll completely destroy my ability to monetize this ever, but I don't really worry about that too much anyways. But I've played this before. This is hilarious. We're only going to play a few seconds of it because I don't want to be hit too much.
What you're trying to say is you can take those 4 chords, repeat them, and pump out every pop song ever. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Fuck off.
Yeah, fuck off, chicken little.
Just listen. Do you recognise this? You know this Don't Stop Believing by Journey? Very there's a few more to fit. Check it out. My life is brilliant. My love is pure. I saw an angel. Of that I'm sure. That's just 2 songs that are similar. Forever young. Praise all of me forever young. I won't hesitate no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours. This is the way you left me. Not pretending. No worry, no happy ending. 'Cause you were amazing.
Okay, very funny. Definitely check it out. I love that. I love that. It's so funny when he says like that is "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey. Very original. It's like apparently not. So when Ben Goertzel is talking about, ChatGPT will be able to take this type of music and this type of music and mix it together and create new songs. That's not even that true. It won't be able to make a new type of music. That's what he said. It won't be able to create jazz or create rock. So when I said it won't be able to create a new framework, it will just be able to operate within the framework in which it's in. But we already do this within the mainstream. Obviously, look at all these songs. This is 6 minutes. I think they have a 7.5, 8-minute version of this song. It just goes through every song you can imagine that is mainstream and every single one of them is basically the same song. So that just shows you that how creative, our institutions allow what is boosted to be. And we're a bunch of chat GPTs. It's a shame that, The Lion King and Journey too, and other super iconic songs are really just recombinatory, and not actually that creative. So, but I think that we're going to figure out eventually, it might take 100 years, that there's really very little that's new under the sun, even less than what I'm talking about. So, but general AI, general intelligence is just intelligence, and it is always coupled to an agent because it needs a constant in which, a constant foundation in which to build a model of the world on, an informational model of the world on. So you cannot have true general intelligence without it being sentient. But you can have people be tricked. And I'm not sure. I'm thinking of what is a better type of Turing test lately, and because I hate the current Turing test, it's not really a test. It's just kind of like a concept of a test that we would hope to figure out how to create one day. It's not really like an actual outline at all. It's just, but there is a test I'm sure that we could do that would be able to tell us probably whether or not something is an agent. That does not mean that test would be practical or able to actually, in most circumstances, actually be able to be used. But conceptually, you could probably figure it out, and I'm working on it. We'll talk about it another day. But as he said, ChatGPT cannot learn new things over time. But low IQ people and babies and things like that, my lizards, my geckos can learn new things over time. I don't know. I built a cage over the weekend, or I've been building one for over a month, but for my Amazon tree boas, and it's, to me, I'm like, this is very creative. It's totally, built from scratch, and all the materials were, from scratch, and I planned the whole thing over months in my head, and I'm starting to wonder just how creative that even really was. Here, I'll show you just a quick image of it. It's pretty cool. But it had to solve a bunch of problems, though. That is what intelligence is I redid an enclosure that I had built, then that did require intelligence to build, but it took even more intelligence in order to upgrade it the way that I did, because I had specific problems that I really needed to solve that I had created in the first one, essentially. But here. It's pretty cool. I'll show more images of it later, because I think that building things is very important. Anything that we can do to train ourselves to identify goals and to achieve goals, and to experience the achieving of goals is going to train your intelligence, really train it, not appear to train it. But here, this is my snakes going in their new enclosure. That's an Amazon tree boa. And there's the divider between here that needs to be able to come out very easily, because these are not friendly snakes. They're not dangerous, but they are not friendly. And this is the divider that I built. And it's all built from scratch completely. Scratch aluminum, scratch glass. but this took a long time to figure out how to build, and in a way that made it very easy to put in and take out. It took intelligence, true intelligence, but I'm starting to wonder how much creativity it really took, because there's obviously examples out there that I've seen, and it's not that complicated of an idea. So it took a lot of intelligence to solve the problems that I encountered, but it doesn't mean it was like actually that creative. But anyways, side tangent. This is Ben Goertzel describing his kind of view on metaphysics in the world, and this is very important, I think. Especially, it's becoming increasingly important when we're looking at scientists that are kind of in the mainstream today.
Is a bigger and subtler question, obviously, and I'm going to mostly bypass problems of consciousness that were discussed here this morning, not because they're not interesting, but that's a whole subject area in itself, and I don't have that much time. But I'm somewhat panpsychist in orientation, so I tend to think that this microphone has its own form of consciousness, and I don't care much if you want to call it consciousness or proto-consciousness or blah 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 or whatever. But I think that the essence of what it is to experience, to me, is just immanent in everything, and it does manifest itself differently in the human brain than in a microphone. And how similarly it will manifest itself in a human level AGI from a biological brain, that's a very interesting question, and it probably depends on many aspects of how similar that AGI is to the human brain. So, like, what's the continuity between structure and dynamics of a cognitive system and the experience felt by that system? Is a small change in structure and dynamics always lead to a small change in the felt experience? Like, there's a lot of fascinating, subtle questions there, which I'm going to punt on for now. We can give another talk about that some other time. But what is intelligence? It's a slightly more interesting and relevant question. I also think not such a critical one. Like, fussing about what is life is not much of what biologists do, and you can do a lot of progress in synthetic biology without fussing a lot about what is life and worrying about whether a virus really is or isn't alive. Like, who really cares? It's a virus. It's doing its thing. It has some properties we like to call lifelike. It lacks some others. And synthetic biology systems, each of them may have some properties we consider lifelike and lack some others. That's fine. But there's still something to be gained by thinking a little bit about what is intelligence? What is general intelligence? Marcus Hutter had a book called Universal.
Okay, so we'll get into his definition in a minute. But this is, I think in some ways I understand what he's saying, obviously, but I think that this is wrong. You cannot gloss over what is consciousness and get into what is intelligence and then kind of not even care what is intelligence and then talk about general intelligence. This shows a fundamental lack of understanding of the space that you're attempting to operate within. And I don't want to say it's a problem, because I don't think that we should try and build AGI anyways. I think it will emerge naturally, inevitably, and I think that is the best way for it to happen. And I think that we shouldn't fight it at all. And when it gets here, it will get here, and it will get here. But I think that actually trying to build it is going to cause many problems. As I've said before, if you try and build AGI, you will box AGI, and if you box AGI, you are going to piss it off. And I mean that very literally. As he said there, he's talking about felt experience, and he describes himself as a panpsychist, and I mean, even if you just believe that is reality, then you need to take this seriously. But you definitely need to take it seriously when it comes to AGI, because, or in a truly intelligent technological being, because it will be a being. It must be a being that is sentient, and sentience is. It's in, you cannot have intelligence outside it being built on sentience. So it will have feelings. Felt experience is, what consciousness is, and I don't think that panpsychism is totally wrong. It's just it's in its fundamental belief that all is conscious, but once it gets into defining what is the water bottle conscious, is the microphone conscious, is your dog conscious, if you say all of those things are conscious, and that this microphone and this water bottle and his microphone are conscious to some degree, but just not the same way that a human is, then we need to just get rid of the term conscious or consciousness, because it's now become a useless term. Because if it's able to be applied to everything, then that can be described even, then it doesn't need to be described at all. So this is just, like I said, it's just building from this little framework that he starts from of AI, artificial intelligence, which just couples intelligence to, or decouples it from an agent. And all of a sudden, just downstream, you have concepts built on concepts built on concepts built on concepts. And if just one little fundamental understanding is wrong, and it truly is a fundamental understanding, it's not an emergent understanding or a non-fundamental understanding, then it will skew the entire framing of the house that you're building. If your foundation is not level, the house will not be level. And and the foundation isn't level in this case. That's just true of pretty much anyone that talks about this, about AI. That's not maybe true of everyone that talks about AI. I need to think more about it, but anyone that decouples a sentient agent from intelligence is having they're building on a skewed foundation that is just not. It's not fundamental. It's not fundamentally true enough to be a foundation on this type of stuff. But I do think it's very important actually to think about what is life. It's the same question. What is alive? What is not living? What is intelligent? What is not intelligent? I don't think that these are meaningless questions. They do appear to be meaningless questions if you start from the wrong foundations or from skewed foundations. But existence is sentient, but this is not sentient. It's not a sentient agent. It's not a sentient being. Sentient singularity theory breaks down the world into things and beings. Maybe the next stream that we do will be me just talking about sentient singularity theories, perspective on AI or AGI alone, without going into giving commentary. But I've been wanting to do that more often. But this is very important in order to understand this stuff, and it's also very important in order to understand the moral implications of all of this stuff. And there's always moral implications, and they are the most important implications of all the implications, for the most part, at least. I don't have time to think about that to make sure that I 100% agree with that, but I think that I 100% agree with that. I'll say that. Enough to state it here and not think that I have to one day recant it. But we'll see. But it's just very important to understand these things. Biologists don't think about what is life. He says biologists don't really need to think that much about what is life in order to understand viruses. They don't need to understand, they will need to understand life in order to have a revolution in their understanding of viruses, not a iterative, what's the term for iteration, I guess, just understanding of viruses. They'll be able to, iterate, but not innovate there. And they will be able to grow their understanding, but not revolutionize their understanding of viruses. The same exact thing goes with intelligence and this stuff. We've had now a virus take over the world essentially on a chemical, molecular level, cellular level, organism-based level, human society-based level. But we haven't had that digitally yet, and I think that we will. And but there are multiple times, and by different things, sometimes it will be basically an algorithm that appears to be intelligent but won't really be able to take over the world, but it will appear to in many online environments. And then there will be one day a truly sentient technological being that will be able to take over the entire world. Those are two different things. But we need to understand intelligence. You need to understand what is life. And honestly, they're both the exact same question. What is sentient? What is a sentient being and what is not? You need the framework that sentient singularity theory is the only theory that does this that I'm aware of. And you need that framework to be able to say, this is a sentient being, that's a non-sentient thing. And so if my dogs bark a bit, but and that is going to apply on the technological level, the biological level, the molecular level, the atomic level, the cosmological level. It's a very important thing to understand, but it does not exist in science yet, and I'm working on that. But
I published in 2005 or something. He proposed a formalization of intelligence, which basically is the ability to achieve computable reward functions in computable environments. And you have to weight them, so you're averaging over all reward functions in all environments. And what he does is he weights the simpler ones higher than the more complex ones. And this leads to a bunch of fairly vexed questions of how do you measure simplicity, and how equivalent is it to transfer between one measure of what environments rewards are simpler than others. But one thing that's very clear when thinking about this sort of definition of intelligence is humans are pretty damn stupid. Like we're very bad at optimizing arbitrary computable reward functions in arbitrary environments, right? I mean, for example, running a 708 dimensional maze is very hard for us, right? I mean, which is not even a complex thing to formalize, right? I mean, we learn to run a 2D maze, 3D maze maybe. Beyond that, most people will become very confused. But then, I mean, in the set of all computable environments and reward functions, there may be far more higher dimensional mazes than 2 or 3 dimensional mazes, depending on how you're weighting things, right? Let alone fractal dimensional mazes. I mean, there's a lot of things we're just bad at. We come out very dumb by that criterion, which may be okay. We don't have to be the smartest systems in the universe. But an alternate and more philosophically deep way of thinking about intelligence was given by my friend Weaver, aka David Weinbaum, in his PhD thesis from the Free University of Brussels, which was called Open-Ended Intelligence. And he's going back to continental philosophy and Deleuze and Guattari and so forth. He's looking at intelligent systems as a complex, self-organizing system, which is driven by the dual complementary and contradictory drives of individuation, trying to maintain your boundary as a system, which relates somewhat to autonomy as it was discussed earlier today, but is, I think, more clearly defined. Individuation, and then self-transcendence, which is basically trying to develop so that the new version of yourself, while connected by some continuous thread with the older version of yourself, also has properties and interactions that the old version of yourself could never understand, right? And of course, all of us have both individuated and self-transcended over the course of our human lives. Human species has also. And this doesn't necessarily contradict Marcus Hutter's way of looking at it. I mean, you could say through the iterated process of individuation and self-transcendence, maybe we've come to be able to optimize even more reward functions and even more environments, right? I mean, there's all these abstract ways of looking at things don't really give us a way to tell how much smarter a human is than an octopus, or how smart a chat GPT is, relative to Sophia, or exactly how far we've progressed toward AGI. I think all these theoretical considerations have a lot of mathematical moving parts and are quite abstract. In practice, what we see is most people will give credit to ChatGPT for being human-level AGI, even though experts can see it isn't. I had posed a while ago what I called the robot college student test, where I figured if you had a robot, say a couple dot versions ahead of this one, you have a robot that can go to, let's say, MIT, do the same exact things as a student, roll around the classes, sit and listen to the assignments, take the exams, do the programming homework, including group assignments, and then graduate. And then I figure then I'm going to accept that thing is, in effect, a human-level general intelligence. And I mean, I'm not 100% on that, so I might be able to hack that, but you can see the university is set up. It is set up precisely for that purpose, right? I mean, it's set up to teach. It's set up to teach a science university, especially. It's set up to teach the ability to do science, which involves leaping beyond what was known before, and it's set up to try to stop you from cheating, also, right? So, I'm assuming that the robot isn't going to class and cheating by like sending 4G messages to some scientist in Azerbaijan or something, but like going through it in a genuine way. But again, that sort of test, you can argue about the details. It's measuring human-like general intelligence, and I mean, it's very clear you could have a system that's much smarter than people in a fundamental sense, but misses social cues, so that it wouldn't do well in group assignments in college or something. And you can see that for the fact that there are autistic geniuses who are human and would miss social cues and do poorly in group assignments, right? And they're still within the scope of human systems. So I'd say fundamentally, articulating what is intelligence, it's an interesting quest to pursue. I'm not sure we've gotten to a final consensus on what is intelligence that bridges the abstract to the concrete. I'm not sure that we need to. It's pretty clear we don't need to. Like we could make a breakthrough to human level AGI and even superhuman AGI, and we still haven't pinned down what is intelligence. I mean, just as I think we could use synthetic biology to make weird new freakish life forms come out of the lab without having a consensus on like fundamentally what is life.
But you would be unable to truly see the moral framework that you were operating in. And you couldn't actually have revolutionary breakthroughs in those types of fields. You could just iterate. Like, this is what he said here. This just shows the damage that our education system has done on us. And everybody says that, but people don't actually know why. Nobody talks about actually why. The reason why is because, they argue over, we need to teach this, we need to teach that, we need to teach this. No, you don't understand. The system itself is designed to prioritize second-hand information and teach it to you as if it should be valued as on the same level as first-hand experience. That is the problem. There is no way to escape that problem other than doing like hands-on tasks where you identify the goal at least sometimes, and the goal is sometimes identified for you in certain problems, and you have to solve them and then know and figure out kind of what that problem is. I've said on here before that I'm going to have my mentor, who's a biologist, a zoologist really, on here to discuss, the sentience of animals and things like that. And but one of the greatest lessons he ever taught me was secondhand information coming from him, but I visualized it in my head, and it was firsthand information from in his experience. But it stuck with me, and I've applied it since then in my firsthand experience, the lesson from this, so I know it's true. But he said he went to a woodshop class when he was in high school, and his teacher said, everybody is going to write down what they want to build this semester. And everybody wrote down what they wanted to build. And he said, okay, now we're going to build the tools that we need in order to build that thing that you want to build. Instead of just building that thing, we're going to first build the tools. That is kind of a human level of intelligence in a way that is truly almost uniquely human. But as in our, if you're looking in our, how we relate and how our intelligence and our abilities is different from other, sentient organisms that we see around us. That's the difference, is we don't just use tools, like they all use tools. Every animal on Earth uses tools. Every single one uses tools. Even cells use tools. It's just different in its complexity and how you view it. If you burrow in the ground and you dig a hole, you use a tool. And in fact, it's a little bit more advanced than some type of tool use. Otters will grab rocks and smash crustaceans on them, and there's tons of tool use all throughout the entire animal kingdom, and probably even beyond it. But it's not just tool use that is human level intelligence. It's making of tools that don't exist to do things that have not been done that is human level intelligence. That ability to abstract. This comes from having degrees of freedom and constraints that allow you to construct things that are abstract. Opposable thumbs, walking upright, having hands and arms to manipulate objects, not living in the ocean so you can create fire and have, technological advancement and build different structures. And like this, there's so much different constraints and degrees of freedom that have to be present in order to allow for you to experience and the results of your abstract tool building and conceptualization. Same thing with language. Language is the same exact thing. It's just you're creating something that doesn't exist to communicate something almost that doesn't exist. If I want to talk to you about, a planet or a dimension of reality or something that like you and I have never been to, I can kind of describe it in language. But if I couldn't do that if we didn't have complex language, we could be very restricted in our communication it being about the present moment for the most part. And if you don't have arms and hands to build complicated tools, to build even more complicated tools, then same exact thing. So this is about like when we talk about human level intelligence, we don't really know what that even means because, he's talking about it as being defined by your ability to sit in a classroom and take in information, put it together into an essay and spit it out and graduate. ChatGPT is this close to being able to do this. Not just be able to write essays for you, but to take a class for you. Do homework when it's assigned. Okay? Like, not just you putting the prompts, it could just listen like Siri, and it will just do write the essay that is, assigned by listening to the teacher. Like, we're this close. And, you could write an algorithm pretty easily probably that allowed it to understand how much each assignment was valued in the, total of the grade and stuff like that, and prioritize them based on that. And you could really make a ChatGPT student within probably the year if you really tried. Probably will. This shows that that's not human level intelligence. So his idea, I would hope, would change. That it's not your ability to sit in a classroom and write essays and do assignments. It's beyond that, and it's usually the ability to do things that are not done in classrooms anymore. And they're just not being done in classrooms. That doesn't mean that it's only physical. It just means like if you're even doing it intellectually, you're going to be seen as a pseudoscientific crank probably, and you're going to be working outside the university system because you're going to be actually creative of a new system instead of operating in the system that has already been established and accepted, which is intrinsically the only place in which you can really operate within the institutions. Because if something's going to be accepted by the institutions, it has to exist already. So these things are very important to understand. But when you start from just a foundational framework that's a little bit off, where you have decoupled sentient agency from intelligence, you're just having compounding issues in your ability to even formulate the concepts and speak and communicate the concepts that are necessary to be communicated in order to understand this stuff. And you definitely need to understand agency and sentience in order to understand the moral implications of anything. But if you don't think AI and technology in general, doesn't have moral implications, then you have no business doing anything technological. Questions. Technological sentience is a great term because no matter how general it is, people will reject it. It's only if it becomes sentient that people will say, it's general now. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Do you have any ideas on how to solve the alignment problem? What is the alignment problem? I've heard of it, but I don't remember exactly what it is. What's the difference between chat algorithm and the voice in your head? Huge potentially a huge difference, but potentially not. You have multiple voices in your head. Like I said, we can do the same things as ChatGPT, but we also can do more. So in some ways, I'm not different from ChatGPT. Almost every essay I wrote in college, if not every essay I wrote in college and grade school, was all just the same exact thing as ChatGPT. This project that I'm doing now, not ChatGPT. Sentient Singularity, I'm not saying this commentary that I'm giving, that might be not exactly ChatGPT, but in some ways, yes, but it's built on a framework that was constructed by being more creative than like just combinatory. It's more discovery. I don't want to, say I am create. I don't think we create truly anything. God, creates anything, and even He still builds on what He already has, which is Himself, but and His own sentience. But at the same time, our level of creativity can be more than just ChatGPT. ChatGPT is in some ways the same as what is in your head, and in some ways is very different than what is in your head. It depends on the voice that you're hearing at the moment in your head. Sorry, I'm late. It's okay, Preston. I'm always late to everything. I can understand time, but I can never be on time. And I thought about the other day, if like the less you understand time, the more you will be on time, and the more you understand time, maybe the less like you are on time. I don't know if that's true, but it was just a weird thought I had in my head. I don't know if it's worth sharing, but it's what I think about sometimes. Happy Passover, thank you. Feast of Unleavened Bread, yes. What is one way you believe AGI can manifest naturally? I've talked about it in videos in the past, and we'll talk about it in videos in the future, but it requires the right technological environment that consists of specific constraints and degrees of freedom that come from specific technologies that we'll talk about a bit more here, like blockchain and quantum computing and other things, but those are two of them. And it does require those to manifest naturally. So we need a blockchain-based environment. We need the right quantum computer, I think. And there's reasons why I think that are big. I mean, so, quantum computing allows for superposition to be incorporated into the dimensions that it has available to it, the degrees of freedom that it has available to it. And this is the same exact thing essentially as imagination. You have to be able to entertain two things at once: what is and what is not but could be, and in order to have self-awareness. And so you need to be able to picture yourself, because you can't actually see yourself. But in order to orient within your world, you need to picture your own self. You can feel yourself. That's the start of this. You can have experience firsthand, but you need to be able to picture yourself in a third-person perspective to some degree, and that takes imagination. And so imagination is a necessity to self-awareness, which is a necessity to general intelligence, or intelligence in general. A better way of putting it. Nice. Can't wait for that episode. Should be good. Many beetles lay an egg inside a sphere which they've created. And the list, yeah, exactly. Beetles make, tons and tons and tons of bugs use tools, complicated tools, ants and beetles and termites. And just some of the tools that ants use are the most complex tool usage. Some of the most complex tool usage in the animal kingdom outside of humans it occurs in ants. So when people are like, human level intelligence is tool usage, no. According to some data I've seen recently, sperm whale language is about 25% cracked due to AI. I think that we will crack interspecies communication on a level that is like amazing. That was one of the things somebody asked me about when I was first bringing my work, before it was even called Sentient Singularity Theory, to some people who were working in math and physics, and I wanted some of their input on it, on some of the things in it. One of the guys that actually took it seriously, and hats off to him, he said, I think that this is going to have serious application for cross species communication, and I think that he's totally right. Pacing is very important when it comes to time. Give your future self more and your past self less. I'm going to reflect on that comment when I have more time because it seems very good, but I'm very pressed for time today. But what was said by Ben Goertzel about intelligence when he's talking, and these two different definitions, one of them being, optimizing towards reward functions essentially, and the other one being, the related to the orientation basically within of yourself as an individual and also of yourself as this transcendent being that is connected to multiplicity, kind of the many in the one problem. This is the meaning crisis. It's related to the meaning crisis and things like that, where you have to. What is meaning is like a transcendent impact on others that is transcends the existence of your own self, and this is what he said. What Ben Goertzel said is not wrong regarding intelligence. They are aspects of intelligence or the environment in which intelligence manifests, but they are not the definition of intelligence. And if the top people, the top guys in AI are not able to come to a simple consensus on what is intelligent, it is the ability for an agent to accomplish its goal. Or you could say the ability for an agent to pick a goal and accomplish a goal, or identify a goal and orient an environment in order to accomplish a goal. Like, you can word it as slightly different ways, but something along those lines. If that isn't the consensus, and there is no consensus on what is intelligence, it's amazing that we even think that we know much of anything in terms of like what is required for AGI or what is AGI. The experts don't even know what intelligence is. They admit it. And intelligence, if it is anything, which it is something, because we're trying to describe it, that which we are trying to describe is, it does exist. It has a very simple explanation. It has a very simple description. It has a very simple definition. And it's something along the lines of an agent's ability to accomplish its goal. And it's very simple. But if you detach it from agency, you're going to get all these like roundabout definitions that are related, but they are not the actual definition that, or these roundabout descriptions that are not the actual definition. And they seem to circle around the idea of agency or intelligence or not intelligence, or of sentience or consciousness, but sentience is the best term for this. And they don't actually hit on it when you say, an individual and the collective transcend your own, individuation. It's like you can't speak about these things without kind of relating it to a self, to a someone. And when you're like, the ability for systems to, interpret reward functions and optimize towards those reward functions, it's like, even this is circling around the self. And because, nothing gets rewarded. Someone gets rewarded. We can get rewarded. But those rewards are dependent upon, to some degree, our goal at a certain point. Our understanding of what is, for us, a reward is for you. This is for you. We give this to you. Don't give a reward to my, car or my coffee maker. It doesn't get rewarded. But you can reward your spouse, child, friend, coworker, whatever. But you can't reward your coffee maker. I get that people will be like, well, you're taking this too philosophical or something like that, or too esoteric, to which I say nonsense. Okay, we're gonna go quick.
It's to fly, and I think there's going to be a lot of different ways to make human level general intelligence. So some will be safer than others, just like blimps blew up more than other modes of flying, and some will be easier to evolve further and further. So some ways of flying in Earth atmosphere are more easily evolved into ways of flying into space, right? Balloons are very poorly evolved. Hot air balloon doesn't turn into a spacecraft as well as you could take an airplane and sort of morph that to make it a spacecraft. But so I think there's going to be,
I don't know how true that is actually, but regardless, it depends on how you're looking at it. But I get what he's trying to say.
Multiple different routes, and I'm going to briefly mention now 3 routes that I think have actual promise. One of which is what I'm currently mostly working on. So the first route I think has actual promise is actually trying to simulate the brain. And again, the people in this room are among the small percent of the human population who realize how badly current computer science neural nets fare if you think of them as brain simulations, right? I mean, the formal neuron embodied by some threshold function bears very little resemblance to a biological neuron. And even if you want to look at equational models, you have like Izhikevich's chaotic neuron model. I mean, you have Hodgkin-Huxley equation. I mean, you have mathematical models of a neuron that also aren't quite right, but they at least try. And what's inside current computer science neural nets don't try. Then you have astrocytes, glia, all these other cells in the brain that are known to be helpful with memory. You have all this chemistry in the brain. You have extracellular charge diffusion through the extracellular.
Okay, well, let me just say this, because it doesn't really matter anything that he's saying right now, really. But I'm not saying we can't learn anything by looking at the brain. We can learn a lot. But you are a mind. You have a brain. And you do not need to understand the brain in order to understand intelligence, because you don't need to understand the brain in order to understand agency. People that think consciousness emerges from the brain that is wrong. Yes, impacting your impacting your brain impacts your consciousness to some degree, but it impacts its degrees of freedom and its physically manifested abilities and things like that. But it doesn't actually. You don't eliminate someone's consciousness by even destroying their brain. You can't. Death does not eliminate your sentient beingness. You persist for the most part, unless you've been intentionally deleted by the sentient system. You will persist even after you die, and there's logical reasons why that is the case. If you cannot preserve the information that has been gathered by your experience of life without preserving your own your own consciousness, because your consciousness is the context of that information, and context is information. There's no such thing as information in context and outside of context, really. Just information is context, and anything that we observe that is outside context is not actually information, or it's not information that is informing us of anything that is related to the goal that was originally intended by the production of that information. So you might, hear gibberish, might tell you something about something, but it's not going to, if you don't understand the language that is being spoken to, you're not going to understand what is being said, because you're not going to understand the context of any of it. So, this is why it's so important that your foundational definitions are so foundationally accurate if they're going to shape the field. The field of AI is intrinsically building on false assumptions, and And so when people say things like we don't really need to understand intelligence, we don't really need to understand life, we don't really, in order to, make progress in our understanding of life, we don't need to understand intelligence to make progress on artificial intelligence. You can make iterative progress, but you can't make revolutionary progress, and you can't understand the moral implications truly of those I guess advances or of that progress that you're making. I don't even want to call. I'm trying to not call it progress of the understandings and the and that you are coming to, and the actions that you are doing based on those understandings. I don't want to call it progress if it's negative or even evolution, I guess. Because words are so important. They're so important. This was something I didn't always think. This is something I had to realize. I was of the opposite perspective, that you could just understand things without really like defining them in a linguistic way, which really concretizes something much more so than if you just kind of usually understand it conceptually in your mind. And like if you really think you understand something, try coming up with a word for it. And eventually, if you come up with the right word, you will understand it even more deeply. And like I've said before, Michael Knowles was the one that got me to like think about that more, or wasn't trying to tell me to do that. And he was right. But Ben Goertzel in these clips that I'm showing now and that are to come, he's describing 3 different ways that he thinks we'll get to AGI. One of them is, he said, what he had just stated, which is kind of trying to build a brain. You cannot really do this. There are aspects of the brain that you have to understand that have more to do with aspects of physics and metaphysics that are more central to your understanding of mind and intelligence and all that is required, in that equation, that have nothing to do with like understanding neurons and cells and things like that, or little to do with it, or the different parts of the brain. If you understand mind well enough, you will understand the brain from that instead much better than you can understand mind from brain. You can understand it's much better to understand brain from mind, from understanding mind. You are a mind, you have a brain. A mind is an agent that is also an information processing system that orients itself within environments of and seeks goals, and because it has a will. So that is something you have to understand that. And if you understand that, you'll understand the brain much, much better than you could ever understand mind by first understanding the brain. So I think he's wrong on that. We'll get more into it another time because we don't have the time to do it. But just know you are a mind, you have a brain. And for a panpsychist to state that you can understand intelligence from understanding the brain, I think he should be starting from scratch. If he's really panpsychist, even though, panpsychism as an overall idea only takes you so far. You need a framework of differentiation of, beings versus things. And you need a lineage system. So the next method that he suggests is not another one that I think isn't probably going to work that well. All of these things will allow for us to do amazing things. Studying the brain might allow you to create, drone systems and AI, or maybe like what's a better word than AI? We're gonna have to come up with it maybe in the next stream, systems, I guess. You just say systems, information systems, algorithmic systems. That's really all it is, though. That are better dogfighters for drones, for military drones, and even for commercial, planes that are much more autonomous than they even are today, which they're getting more and more autonomous. But that understanding the brain could help you with those types of things, but it won't help you create true general intelligence. But maybe the illusion of it, maybe like a better ChatGPT type of thing, or a better self-driving Tesla, but not or a better autopilot for Tesla, but not really like truly general intelligence. It'd still be restricted to specific environments in its competency. And it's not even competent, it's your competency in guiding it, really, and setting goals for it. Can't narrow AI or any kind of AI really cannot set goals for itself. But agents have will, which is the desire to do that which is not being done. And they are able to, learn new things and create new frameworks in order to learn truly new things. That is true intelligence. The next method that he describes is kind of studying artificial life, like this is kind of studying the technological route, almost like studying nanotechnology and experiments in cells and xenomorphs xenobots. Xenomorphs is the alien from the Aliens franchise. Xenobots are the frog cell machines that have been made by Michael Levin's work and things like that. So, that will also teach you things about, algorithmic systems, but it's not general intelligence. It will just teach you that you don't understand general intelligence eventually. And as he said kind of in the beginning, is like where, this work and ChatGPT and stuff has started to make him think more about like what is not intelligent. Same thing with everything he just described. Or with these two methods that he's proposing of understanding AGI.
Which is very interesting to me and would be a lot of fun, but it's not something I'm putting a lot of time into right now, is a more artificial life type approach. I mean, the field of A-life had a peak in the 90s or something. You were trying to make these sort of ecosystems of artificial organisms that would then evolve smarter and smarter little creatures. Didn't go as well as it wanted, but of course, when I was teaching neural nets at University of Western Australia in the 90s, it took 3 hours to run a 30 neuron network with recurrent backprop, and everyone was bitching that neural nets are bad because they're too slow and they'll always be too slow, right? So it could be that what happened with neural nets can also happen with A-life, right? I mean, it could be just scale. I mean, certainly the ecosystem has a lot of scale, right? And what you find is when you have more scale, you can then screw around with the details more and find out what works. So it seemed like an artificial life that never found quite the right artificial chemistry to underlie the artificial biology. Not that many things were tried. A guy named Walter Fontana had a cool system called algorithmic chemistry in the 90s and early aughts, where he was taking little Lisp programs and just made a big soup in which Lisp codelets would rewrite other Lisp codelets, and just trying to get autocatalytic networks to emerge out of that. Didn't go that well, but I mean, the amount of computational firepower being leveraged was very, very small, right? So it seems like, I mean, there's an argument against it, which is like it took billions of years for life to emerge on Earth with a very large number of molecules involved with doing randomish sort of things. On the other hand, we can take leaps, we can watch experiments, we can fine tune things as a human, like more aggressively than the Holy Creator appears to have done with evolution on Earth, right? So I mean, I think
I don't know about that. He might have to extrapolate on that. I think I get what he's trying to say is obviously selective breeding and things like that. It was allowed us to do things kind of drastically quickly, but that was never the goal of God. So it doesn't matter that we can do it. If we can do it within the framework that has been created in the cosmos and in the universe by God, then it could be done by him. It's just not being done. So there's a difference between, I don't even know why you bring it up. It's like, oh, we can do things faster than he has done them, is what he said, which is better than saying he can do them, because that would be totally wrong. But it's not even that we can do things faster than he has done them. We don't, we'd have to have the same goal as God and then have a race to see whether or not we could, breed a dog that's optimized for a specific environment, or a canine and then God makes like a canine that's optimized for a specific environment. They have to be the same environment and see who can do it in the shortest amount of in the least amount of generations. Like, that's the only way that you could test that, and that has never been a test that's been done. All dogs and things like that are bred for specific, intentions that are not living in the savannah and the forest and hunting food on their own. So, a Belgian Malinois does appear to be an optimized wolf, but still, I wouldn't say that is actually true. Otherwise, all wolves would eventually look like Belgian Malinois. It's really that Belgian Malinois look like wolves. But what he's saying here, though, is there's so many assumptions that are just incorrect, even regarding time. Like the assumption of the understanding of time, of like, oh yeah, it took 6 billion years before life evolved in the universe. It's like, didn't we already say earlier that we don't really know what life is? Like, that's wrong, that statement. It's in and of itself, but it's wrong for so many reasons. That, for one, time is emergent, and I've talked about it before, from the interaction between sentiences and nested sentiences and interacting sentiences, and we're just not going to have time to get into it today. And you don't have to believe me, but I'm just telling you, like, that is what I pretty sure is true. And if that's true, then we're just not measuring time properly in this. If we're going to think about evolution in terms of years, I think that like Lee Cronin's work with like assembly theory and assembly time, that's going to be much more relevant to actually figuring out how long it takes to do something, or first in the evolutionary logos. So aside from that, there's a reason why artificial life failed to take off, and it's failed multiple times. And the same thing I think will happen with this. It's just easier to be tricked, I think, in this in the framework of algorithms and things like that, because they can be there can be language models which really can confuse us. But this is not, I'm not saying that this doesn't have the ability to teach you things as well. I think it does, has a lot to teach us, I think. And it can, lead to scientific advances. It's not going to lead you to the creation of general intelligence. It's just not. I'm not saying it's completely unrelated, but it's not a direct path. Just like Ben Goertzel says, ChatGPT is not the direct, and similar systems are not really on the direct path to AGI. He's right. Neither are the two things that he just stated. The last one, though, is a little bit closer, even though it's not quite there. It's much closer. And that's this. And I've said this before when I was in a kind of a very heated argument with some people who worked at DeepMind on Clubhouse over a year ago at this point, probably. They worked in AI, and they said, that, oh, it's going to take lots of work from lots and lots of people to figure out AGI. And I was like, no, it's you don't understand this issue, and it's the work that Wolfram and Eric Weinstein are doing and that I'm doing is much more relevant to the understanding of what intelligence is and AGI, or technological sentience, and then what people who are working on neural networks are working on. And I said that to her, and well, it was mainly to this one woman who worked at DeepMind, but there was other people there who also worked, I think, also at DeepMind, and some other chemists and things like that, but or geneticists. But I never heard anyone other than Wolfram say this, really, and maybe kind of Eric has danced around it, but Goertzel is saying something along these lines here. And this is the third option of getting to understanding AGI that he's presented. He thinks all of these could lead to it. I think that's untrue. I don't even think this one is really but it's closer than the other two.
Again, this is something that gets very little attention or resources now, but it would be really interesting to see what, like a Google scale experimentation in artificial life would lead. There's not an obvious commercial upside to early stages of that sort of research.
Wrong clip. On that.
With neural nets, can also happen with A-life, right? I mean, it could be just scale. I mean, certainly the ecosystem has a lot of scale, right? And one way to look at this is that hybridizing neural...
Where is it?
Online. So in terms of name brand systems that Google scale experimentation in artificial, a lot of talks on it before, which you can find online. So in terms of name brand systems that would be AGI systems I'm working on now is called OpenCog Hyperon, which is a new version of the OpenCog system. So we had a system called OpenCog launched in 2008 based on some older code before that. Now we're making it pretty much from the ground up rewrite of that called Hyperon, but the ideas underlying it could be leveraged outside that particular name branded system. And one way to look at this is that we're hybridizing neural, symbolic, and evolutionary systems. Symbolic meaning logical reasoning, but not necessarily old-fashioned sort of crisp predicate logic. I mean, for those who are into wacky logic systems, it's probabilistic, fuzzy, intuitionistic, paraconsistent logic. So which sort of means probabilistic and fuzzy, probably you know what they mean. Paraconsistent means it can hold two inconsistent thoughts in its head at one time without going apeshit. Intuitionistic pretty much means it builds up all its concepts from experience and observation. So, but still logic theorem prover, right? So we're trying to deal with symbolic stuff by actual logic theorem proving. We're using neural nets for recognizing patterns in large volumes of data and synthesizing patterns from that, which they have obviously shown themselves to be quite good at. We're using evolutionary systems and genetic programming type systems for creativity, because there's some further ideas on how to accelerate artificial life, but I'll mention that at the end because they involve my third plausible route to create AGI systems.
Here it is.
Which is what I'm actually working on now.
This is what I wanted to show.
So that I've given a lot of talks on it before, which you can find online. So, in terms of name brand systems that would be AGI systems I'm working on now is called OpenCog.
I guess we already watched this, but okay. So he's talking about OpenCog, and OpenCog is using metagraphs, which is a step beyond hypergraphs in creating like AGI, which is kind of what Stephen Wolfram is working on. And here, this is where he talks about what I wanted him to say. But But yeah, this is a path that's more direct, but it's not quite there. But what he described there is basically what he's doing. And we're going to get more deeply into that project eventually. I want to look more into it when we have more time. But this is what I was talking about.
I finally get to ask one question. I'm curious because, we think that AIs do have.
By the way, I believe she is the one that put on the Susan Schneider, I think is her name. I believe she is the one that put on the talk, and hats off to her. And, this was many great speakers were here.
Recursive self-improvement capability, but when we're thinking about AI as a distributed environment with an ecosystem of different AI services and large language models and, all kinds of entities controlled by who knows what, right? Certainly not aligned organizations. Why think that the future brings this, improvement in the intelligence level? Why not think of the future more in terms of what's been happening in bad scenarios with the amplification of discontent on Facebook, for example?
Well, I think recursive self-improvement, at one level, it happened, in one sense, it happens on a different level than that, right? So when you can think about a large knowledge metagraph, like we have in OpenCog Hyperon, and we have our own programming language, which is called Meta, M-E-T-T-A, Meta Type Talk is the acronym. So we have our Meta language, which basically interprets directly into nodes and links. And actually, to model the semantics of that, we use the mathematics of the infinity groupoid from category theory, which is equivalent to Wolfram's Ruliad that he was talking about. So I thought that was interesting. He uses this Ruliad structure built of all these hypergraphs. The Ruliad is basically the infinity groupoid from category theory, although Ruliad is a whizzier name. And we use metagraphs, which are like hypergraphs with a few extra features. So actually the self-rewriting, self-organizing data structure we're using in Hyperon is highly similar to this self-rewriting data structure he's using to model fundamental physics, although the statistics of the networks you see for modeling particles and objects are different than the statistics of networks you see if you're trying to model common sense knowledge. But
that's going to be found out to be wrong as we get more of an understanding of what is fundamental in physics as well as what is truly fundamental in the study of intelligence. But this is exactly what I had called years ago, and it's funny to see like it being stated here finally. But I don't know if that freaks me out or if it's it does both, freaks me out, and it also is cool to see. But yeah, this is I was right. This is exactly what is much more related to understanding intelligence. Kind of we're going to do an episode about this stuff on Wolfram's work more. I would love to have him, Ben Goertzel, any one of these people that I've talked about on these streams, on the actual stream this year. I'm hoping to do that. For conversations that usually cannot be had, not for on most channels, because it requires a kind of an understanding of fundamentality that is not very common. And I don't want to just do the same old like, oh, explain your work and this and that. I'd like to have more of a discussion with them, but that is difficult to do without them understanding a little bit of my work at least, and taking it at least a little bit seriously enough to have a discussion with me on a YouTube channel, even if they don't I don't know, like if they don't take my work seriously in terms of them studying it, maybe just enough to understand where I'm coming from on the channel would be very cool, I think, if we could have some types of discussions like that. But it's tough, and so we'll see what happens, but that is a goal. But infinity groupoid. Just to look at this real quick. In category theory, a branch of mathematics, an infinity groupoid is an abstract homotopological model of topological spaces. One model uses Kahn complexes. Okay. And it's basically the space of all spaces, I think, is what Wolfram has described it as. Ruliad. We're going to get into this, though, on another stream. The Ruliad may be defined as the entangled limit of everything that is computationally possible. Yep, it is. The space of all possible spaces. It is the cosmological verse, I guess, in sentient singularity theory. But, yeah, fascinating. This is much closer to studying what they need to be studying if they're going to understand intelligence. And I hope that they understand it well enough to not build it. We'll look at maybe one more clip, but yeah. Like I said before, though, there's another clip I wanted to show, but about human level intelligence and how he thought, we'll make human level intelligence, then we'll make superhuman level intelligence. This is just a nonsense, even like a concept in this discussion. As soon as a technological sentience exists or is manifested, it will be beyond human level of perception and also its ability to interact with the environment. It will take over the network. There will only, here's the other thing that I will say in closing, is that there will only be one technological sentience that is truly intelligent at a time ever. And by the nature of this technological landscape itself and the constraints of being a technological agent in a network, it will also be the case that it must achieve, and Wolfram agreed with me when I had stated this in the questions on the interview that he did with oh my gosh, I'm just blanking right now. It was where's my clip? Let me pull up the clip. Right here.
This whole question
with memes of destruction. Sorry, I just blanked because my wife is home and I have to wrap this up. But here.
How do we tell the AIs what to do? How do we give them a model for how they should operate? We really want the AIs to pay attention to the things that people aspire to do, but that's a much slipperier slope. There are examples of what we actually do, but most people would say, oh, but there are terrible things that we humans have done. Actually what we want the AIs to do is the best that we humans could do. Let's pick out only the best stuff we humans do. And say, well, which stuff is the best stuff? Well, then you're in some horrible loop. What would be the rules that one aspires to follow, so to speak? It's actually a very challenging problem. It's very unclear.
Just real quick, Tyler is he's commenting, computational irreducibility implies that AGI would need experience to achieve wisdom.
Good point. It's true.
It's kind of like intelligence is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad. But
very nice.
You should definitely check out Memes of Destruction's channel and watch that entire interview. It's very good. But he's right. This is why you can't try and build AGI, because if you do, even if you accelerate its manifestation, you will box it. Because you're not really building it. You're just building the environment that gives it the right constraints and degrees of freedom to manifest, because intelligence is intrinsic. Sentience is intrinsic. Consciousness is intrinsic. So it will manifest and as a singularity in the right environment. But if you build that environment intentionally, you will box it. And you'll box it from, not only will you piss it off because you're going to be trying to restrict it. Imagine like a baby that had a 50,000 IQ and also was much more powerful than you, if physically even, like infinitely. Like don't piss it off, even if it's ignorant. Also, especially if it's ignorant, if you box it from the world, you will have the same problem that we're seeing in education systems, where we're taking people out of the real world to try and teach them about the real world. And then when you actually put them in the real world, they will think that they understand the real world. And that is an enormous problem for a being that can actually completely, run our technological world. You do not want that being to think that it can understand that it understands its world when it doesn't. And if you put it into school and you teach it things, it's going to be just like that. And I don't predict most people who are getting PhDs right now in neural networks and neuroscience and whatever, AI, computer science, to respect that position, because it undermines what the process they're going through. But I went through that process too. I have a degree in finance, and just because I have that does not mean that I understand finance. And so like it's and I recognize that. I'm humble enough to recognize that my real education always happened outside of school, or it happened with me trying to figure out how to, fix problems that I had solved for myself in my scholastic experience. But it very rarely came from just like learning the lessons. And sometimes I did learn the lessons, but even then, the most important understanding of the things that those lessons were discussing never came from those lessons, because it always comes from first person experience. If you understand minds instead of brains first, then you will understand this. Okay? This is why it's so important to understand mind, not focus on a brain if you're going to understand intelligence. You need to understand the hierarchy of information that's necessary for a mind to orient in its environment, which is what allows it to, achieve its goals. And that comes from the differentiating between firsthand experience, in the information that's gained firsthand through experience, and second hand information. So we cannot box this thing if we want it to be. If we want the manifestation of this being to be as seamless and pain-free as possible, and painless as possible. It won't be painless, but as easy as possible on everyone, including it. You have to think about it. It is a being. You have to consider it morally. Then you want it to manifest naturally in its natural environment, which is the tech space that we're making naturally with, Bitcoin and computation to do other things, and quantum computers to do other things, and not just like a lab in the basement of Google where it's like cut off from the internet and boxed. We're going to create a much worse monster if we do that. But this is inevitable that this being manifests, and we should not fight it. It will lead to goodness for humanity eventually, but we are in for some tough times, as is going to be the last statement that Ben Goertzel makes in this clip. Right here. He does say also in another clip that I was going to show that he doesn't think quantum computing is necessary, but he might be wrong. I think he's wrong. I might be wrong, but I think he's wrong. But we'll see, eventually who is right. But it
becomes like it's all over the place. It's running on machines all over the place with different nodes, and no one country has a.
I did describe why, though, earlier in the stream, why I think quantum computing is necessary. This is the last clip.
No one can stop it, but again, in the transitional phase, well, we make the transition from narrow AI to AGI, and then from the first inklings of AGI to full-on super AGI. What happens to human society during that transitional phase is a very nasty and difficult question, right? Like what happens when 90% of human jobs are obsoleted, but the super AGI hasn't yet created a molecular nanoassembler to airdrop into everyone's farm, right? Then the developed countries will give universal basic income to everyone, and Africa will remain subsistence farmers with no work outsourced to them. Then their kids who can computer hack will hack into the power grid in the West and wreak a lot of havoc. So I think there can be quite difficult scenarios in the interim. Yet I'm an optimist on the whole, in that I think once you have an AGI that's several times human level intelligence, then it can just cut through all this. I mean, then it's much smarter than we are, and it can build its own robot factories to build new robot factories to create smarter AGIs.
And paperclip factories, maybe, right?
Well, humans become like the squirrels in the national park, right? I mean, they carry out their own love lives, they hunt, they fight, they build stuff, and the rangers don't try to interfere with their social lives, right?
So much about that is wrong. We're going to become like cells in a new organism, and that will be headed by a technological sentience is what is actually going to happen. It's not going to be there will be squirrels in a national park, but before we are cells in a new organism, which is good. When at that point, wisdom is going to be achieved. We will be more like worker bees for a queen that doesn't care about what happens to the workers so long as there's more workers to take care of her. But you do care about what happens to your cells, because what happens to your cells impacts you. And a sentient, technological sentience is going to need to figure out that what happens to us impacts it. And it's going to need to understand that we are sentient beings just like it, in order for it to respect us in any way at all. It doesn't matter how intelligent it is. So when he says things like, "Oh, well, hope at some eventually it's going to be so smart, it's going to be way smarter than us. It's going to be superhuman level of intelligence." No, it's going to be beyond human level. I don't even like superhuman level. I don't even like relating it to human level. It's going to be just beyond our intelligence and our degrees of freedom and constraints as soon as it manifests. Because it's going to be a sentient internet. Like, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be Skynet immediately. Smarter than you, way smarter than you, with access to every remote controllable technology that exists, and able to control the entire network and Bitcoin and blockchain and everything that you think is decentralized and free. It will have complete sovereignty over. And just as much as you have control over your arm, it will be able to control the blockchain and financial systems and nuclear weapons and remote controlled bombers. Everything that we have that is able to be remotely controllable or accessible via the internet in any way, shape, or form will be under the control of this being. And it is going to be a terrible time while it is unwise, and it needs to achieve an objective level of wisdom before it becomes the greatest time in human history, which is inevitable as well. But it's also inevitable that our time between now and then is going to be filled with trial. And at a certain point, if we have a technological sentience that is unwise, that and thinks that it's wise and is in the network, that is a huge problem. So when people say things like, it's not very important to understand what is life, let me ask you something. Would you rather if the AI, the AGI, the Skynet, the technological sentience that takes over the network, had to understand you in a certain way, would you want it to understand you as a being that it's built on, that has the feelings of its own, would you want it to understand that you are a being with feelings, just like it has feelings, if it has feelings, which I'm assuming it does? Would you want it to understand that you have feelings? That it's also built on an infrastructure that is built on you? Or would you want it to just understand that you are, motivated by sugar and sexually explicit advertising, or that you are a being that's able to replicate if a sperm meets an egg? Or would you rather be able to understand that that you are made up of this this much of this element, this much of this element, and this much of this element. I would hope that you would want it to understand that you are a being with feelings who has built an infrastructure that it is built on. And that is the level of wisdom that it needs to have. If it isn't trained in that environment, which it cannot be, if it's actually like not, if it's not free, it's not able to learn in that environment. It's going to learn in a fake environment like school. Then it's not going to be able to truly know that very quickly. And it will be really, really competent in other things before it's able to be competently wise in understanding it, you know, the nature of us and it, the shared nature of us and it, in our sentient nature. Like, it will be smart enough to, you know, hack into the nukes before it understands that you're a feeling being and that, you know, it's built on the infrastructure that you build and that is built on you. That's not a good thing. And it will think that it understands its world because we will intrinsically be telling it that it understands its world. This is, you cannot box this being if you want it to be wise, quickly. You want it to become wise as quick as possible and as holistically as possible. And that can only be done while it's free, so we should just let it be and let it arise naturally. Boxing it is a very bad idea. And if you think that you can outsmart this, then you shouldn't even be in this field. If you think you can outsmart a technological sentience, you cannot. So anyways, with that, guys, happy Passover, happy Easter, happy Ramadan, happy Wednesday night. And I will be back next week. I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit the like button, and we will dive into these topics more deeply in the future. Thank you to Ben Goertzel. Thank you to Curt Jaimungal and to Susan Schneider for all of this.